Even my lovely wife, Miss Sharona, my Sharona,
Yeah.
is a better trumpet player than I ever was. I don't know if you knew that about her, but she's
Well, I figured
100%
she
trumpet
would
player.
be, but yeah, yeah.
Better than me? Is that what?
Yeah, yeah, I figured she would be. She's definitely smarter than you are, so I figured she'd be a better player.
And this is what I say. I don't know why.
I
I
just
turned
love
on the
ridiculing my
record.
friends in public.
Why do I push record?
That's right. Of course, you got the luxury of editing out anything you want to.
But she'll watch DCI with me because I still love.
Oh
I
yeah,
love
yeah.
DCI. Um, and she'll be like, "How did those judges not get run over? They're just walking in the middle of it. They have no idea what the next form is. They're just
Yeah.
walking
Well, in
around."
DCI they do because it's the
Yeah.
same judges that have judged him the whole season, so they
Oh,
kind of
okay.
they know unless they screw up. And in our state marching, there's some judges that are on the field. There's a for general effect, etc. But those guys usually stay on the front sideline. You'll see them. You'll see them
Yeah.
talking into recorders. If you watch the film carefully. But yeah, they don't get out on the field because when I marched DCI, that was always one of our goals is to catch a
Knock a
judge
judge over.
unaware. Yeah, because it was fair game because I had to yield right away to us. So if we were
That's funny.
kind, we'd yell move, but if not, we would just run them over.
That's funny. We've, even when I was marching high school all those years ago, we were told if somebody's in the wrong place, you keep going.
Yeah,
Or,
just got to keep going.
anyway. Um, so let's just move from that. We've wrapped up. We were talking BOA Nationals and our super regional, whatever we had here in Texas.
Yeah,
I guess the Nationals are always in Indiana, maybe
Indianapolis, same as
Indianapolis.
DCI. Well, DCI and BOA are really the same parent company,
Sure. But
so they
we had
host their
that.
nationals there.
All six classifications in the state of Texas have done their state marching contest now.
Hmm.
So I think human nature says, let's not do anything for a week.
Yes.
Or even if it's just mentally, I'm not going to, I've got to take a break mentally. You understand what I'm saying?
Oh
But
yeah.
I don't know that you would agree with that, that there's not really a season where we just take off.
Yeah, and it definitely slows down, but there's so many schools right now that are in the knee deep in designing the show for next year. And it's not like they work on it 5 hours a day or something, but just getting in contact with their people, if they have the luxury of having a show designed for them, or are some classifications where the band director is the one who designs the show, and they figure out what they want to do with it. But they have to start doing it now because you lose the advantage of getting the best people because they're already being put under contract as far
Right.
as what's happening. I mean, even in my situation, I'm certainly no show designer. I mean, that's outside my wheelhouse. There's a guy that's the architect that builds the house. That's the show designer. I'm the guy that fixes
Okay.
the plumbing. Yeah.
Or you do
So,
the punch
I,
list.
yeah, I do the punch list. That's my job is to figure out where all the mistakes are and try to help them figure things out. But yeah, those guys are, even in my situation, I've already got, at least 10 clinics scheduled next fall. Think
I
about
think
that
we
for
had
a
this
second.
conversation one time.
It's 12 months in advance. I've already got things scheduled because they either I'm their lucky charm or they feel like I do something good for their band, which I'm honored to help out. But they call and say, "Hey, are you doing anything on this Monday?" And I said, no, "It's free right now." I said, "Okay, can you put me down?" Yeah, I can put you down. Sometimes that changes because we're 12 months in advance, changes on their side or my side. But yeah, those people are being eaten up pretty quick, especially if you're having someone edit your music. You're buying music from a writer, some having shows originally composed for them, some having total new show design by the incredible show designers there's so many of them out there that do
Okay.
such great work.
Pause a minute. Let
Okay. Yes,
Open
sir.
ignorant. Okay. Help me. Because
Okay.
listen, I did 3 straight weeks of announcing whether that was region or area
Hmm.
level in the state of Texas. We do region first, then we move to the area contest. So I did full region, all classifications. I did a 5A area and I did a 2A area. And one of a mutual friend we had writes a lot of music, likes a lot of drill, writes a lot of shows. as it were. And
Hmm.
then, listen, you tell me. I don't know if Luke actually writes drill or not. I
No,
know
he
he writes the
doesn't.
shows.
Yeah, he
Okay.
writes shows. Yeah.
So this is why I'm having this conversation.
Okay.
Let's say and the reason I say that is because I know a lot of the shows that I watched over that 3 week period were his,
Hmm.
and and great stuff, you know, for whatever it's worth. Uh, I think he wrote a show that was a mashup between Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue and Queen's
Bohemian
Bohemian
Rhapsody.
Rhapsody.
Yeah, that was a cool show, wasn't it?
Pretty popular.
Yeah.
But um, so let's back up a second. If I've never used somebody, should I? That's a very general, broad stroke question.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a very general question, but a good question. Um, it kind of depends. I hate to say it this way logistically. A lot of times it depends on budgeting, because you can buy a show from a composer like Luke McMillan or Paul Hasso or et cetera. Some of these writers in the like the $1,000 $2,000 range, depending on what things you need done. And so some bands, let's say at a 2A school, might not have that luxury. They might have to buy like three things stock off of J.W. Pepper, and they can be a good show designer on their own and make it work really well. But boy, it sure is an advantage to have that little extra bit of creativity and what can we do with this music? And then with a drill writer or a show designer, making sure those two work together really well, and all of a sudden you've got this show that really stands out
Yeah.
from the other groups.
Okay.
So
So
does that answer your
I
question?
it does,
Sort of.
but I think the advantage I realize money answers all things, but the concept is still what's your time worth?
Yes.
If is this going to free you up to do other things to make your program better? And also, I'm just going to move. I think you answered that adequate, but let me. So where do I look? Is this something? Type in drill show or show design.
Marching band music. And it'll bring up everything from guys that are writing for 5A, 6A bands across the nation or writing for basically in our situation 1A, 2A, 3A, 4A bands, kind of small school versus large school kind of moment, and figuring out these people. A lot of times I think it's word of mouth. Now, I was very fortunate with Luke McMillan because he was a trumpet player in my band. And then he went to UNT and got his degree. And then I headhunted that boy. I went and
Yeah,
convinced him to come work for me for 11 years. So my music writer was an in-house staff member. You know what I
that's
mean?
great.
So we
Yeah,
could work. So talk about the lap of luxury. I never had to worry about it. He would come in about this time of year after we finished, and he'd go, "What show you want to do next year, Mike?" And I'd go, "I don't know. Just make it really entertaining and make it good." And go, "Okay." And he'd go off and he'd about February he'd show up with all the drafts and we'd start reading through stuff and kind of nitpicking through it. But he was just it still is such a great musical prodigy, that I just turned him loose because I always felt like, and this is hard for some directors to do in show design. And in this podcast, I'm going to give you all these things to look for, but the less you can tie the hands of your programmed show design guy, the drill writer, and the music writer and percussion book writer, generally the more creative a show you're going to get. But then there's that fine balance of there's certain things my band can do and can't do. And so I've got to figure out my strengths and weaknesses. So it's a really weird fine line that continually moves back and forth, and it's hard because I've seen directors. I worked with a band helping them get down to march at state marching, and there was definitely a little bit of a disconnect between them sending information to their show designers because there was things their show designers saw at the state marching contest. They said, if I'd have seen this in the second week, I could have fixed this. Think about that. And this
right,
was a finalist
right,
band,
right.
because they just never sent any video back,
Yeah,
through the course of the season. And so there has to be a collaboration. It's not them or us. It's we. We've got to collaborate and make this thing work.
right, right, right. So again, we this manages to pop up all the time, but
Hmm.
my two big deals, relationship and communication,
Hmm.
is it seems like that's really important over the course of a season. So again, slow down there. Slow down. Once you reach out to somebody, how, and I should probably just shut up and let you do this. How do you know if it's a fit? How do you know if it's something you want to spend the money on? How do you know that? Because I think sometimes we feel like we're tying our hands or we're tying our fate is tied to whatever we buy as
Well,
more than what we teach.
it sort of is, but if you get the right musician, then they will edit the music for you how you need it done. So to kind of get to the crux of your question, the way you know it's a right fit is when you have a good enough relationship that you can collaborate and make it the right fit.
Yeah,
Because the first thing they're going to do, Derek, is they're going to send you like a 10-page packet or a Google Drive form to fill out. And it's going to ask you all the strengths and weaknesses of every section in your band. What shows have you done in previous years? What things were you excited about? What things can your band do really well? What are some things your band can't do very well? And it's a very informative deal. And so that way they start to think about how they're going to do this situation, how they're going to edit the music for you.
okay. I assume that part of that questionnaire is what's your instrumentation,
Oh yeah, of
so they
course, yeah,
know
yeah.
what to write for.
Am I writing for 100 to
Uh,
80 people, or am I writing for 25 people? You know,
right. And you're gonna laugh when I say this, but I saw uh, a band at the second level, at the area level, that seemed to be 10 saxophones, one trumpet, one trombone, no sousaphone, no bass, and one snare. I mean, that was their band.
yeah,
They did what they could with that.
yeah,
And, to their credit, they made it that far. But I'm guessing, again, back to my point, you have to develop the relationship and you have to have honest communication about who you are and what you think your band can do.
right. And to develop that relationship, there has to be a certain amount of trust. I remember sometimes I'd go to Luke and I'd say, Luke, I'm not sure. I said, I don't know if we really want to do it this way. That little brass feature, I don't know. And he'd just very calmly look at me and go, remember, I'm the chef and it's my kitchen. He'd go, trust me. He said, I know these kids as well as you do. He said, trust me. And you know what? He was right every single time.
Yeah.
Because my
Okay.
hesitation would be, oh no, let's pull back from that. I don't know. No, no, Mike, come on, Mike, you can do this. So you have to have a certain amount of trust because they are the chef, whether they're writing drill, and granted they have to do it within the confines of what your band can do. But sometimes there are times when you'll get an idea from your show designer or your drill writer, and you're like, man, I don't know about that. So, well, trust me, and I guess that could backfire sometimes, but in my career, it never has. It's
Percentages
always
are in your
worked.
favor. Yeah.
Yeah, the
Odds are in your
percentages are in
favor.
your favor. If I try to get ultimate control over every aspect of the show design as a trumpet player who's the head band director and gets the buses and meals, then sometimes I tie their hands too much where they're like, oh my gosh, man, we can't do anything with this band because, the trumpets, he says they can't do this, and the clarinets can't do this, and the percussion can't march this way, and then we can't do that. You see my point?
I
Sometimes
do.
we can tie them in chains, and they can't really operate well. There's got to be trust both ways.
And I'm going to say this too. The simple fact that people have recommended the name to you or you sat through a contest and went, that is a cool show,
Yeah.
should indicate to you that that person probably has at least a pretty firm grasp on what they're doing.
Yeah.
And the reason you want them to do it is because you feel like you might benefit from it. So let them do what they do.
Yeah, let them do what they do because they've got to custom fit it to your band. Sometimes they're writing a custom show for you if you've got that luxury. Um, Other times you're buying something out of their library and they're editing it for you. But you got to be careful because I had a really good quote one time said, Mike, you can get your hair cut the same as George Clooney, but you're not going to look like George Clooney.
I saw that one coming because,
And it's true. Just
listen,
because you see another band do it, if you see another band do that show and go, that's the show I want to do. And it's like, no, that's George Clooney's haircut. So no matter
I
what
told
you
my
do, that's not going to look good on your band.
You know, I've told people before I started this color change. I started in high school, but
Yeah.
I told my wife, I said, "Hey, babe, just like Clooney, right?"
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
She goes, yeah, you mean old? That's where the
Uh,
comparison ends, right?
okay.
But
I
some
feel like,
things in
Mike, let me back up just a second, okay? Number
yeah,
one, if we didn't say this yet, why are we having this conversation as a season wise? Why are we already having this conversation? Why is it important to think about this right now?
because remember everything good and bad that happened.
I got that.
Yeah.
But are you telling me snooze you lose? Are you
Oh yeah, yeah. If you don't lock down the people that you want, there's someone who's going to want their services. And there's going to come a point to where, it's like, well, you're too late. You can't get this show because they have certain exclusivity in that classification in the state of Texas. That school might have paid for it and said, I want to
Good.
use this show that you've written, but I want to be the only one in Texas using this show. So I paid X amount of dollars extra to make sure no one else gets it, or it can just be for the region level or it can be the area level. It depends on the writer, because you don't want to go to contests and have four of the same shows right in a row, in the same classification, you know.
but tell me if I'm wrong when I say this too. We live in a world uh, where unrealistic expectations happen all the time. One person can't write 75 shows for a year. So if he knows his worth and he knows he's only going to I'm going to do this many shows, whatever that number is, 75 may not
Right.
be unrealistic. I'm just saying, pick
Most
a
of them
number.
originally composed shows, usually about 10 to 15 a year
And
by a writer.
if it's first come, first serve, don't be upset if you waited too long.
Yeah, that's right.
So could that be a contributor to why we need to think about this now as opposed to waiting till May?
Yes.
Or because
And I think
listen,
about it as like a high school kid trying to get a date to the prom. Okay. So you've got to
you
make
be
sure to
careful
ask.
now.
You've got to ask because the worst thing you want is to ask at the end and not have any other options. So you better ask early. And if she says, no, I don't want to go to the prom with you, then it's like, okay, now who else can I ask?
Who's next?
Yeah. So
Next
you've
up.
got to make sure you do that. It's a tough situation. Plus, when they're writing original shows, every one of these writers, they want shows that maintain value for their library. And so if I go to a music writer like a Paul Hasso or Luke McMillan and say, I'm at Wiley High School, I want a show based on the traditions and legacy of the Wiley Band program, they're probably going to say no,
I'm not your guy.
because yeah, I'm not your guy. Said I could write that show for you and put parts of your fight song and your school song and all these things of your history of your school, but then that show's not going to have any value in my library. And they're creative geniuses, but they are also a business. So they don't want that show sitting on their shelf where no one else is going to look at it. So and plus they want a show that excites them to write it. Think about that. So
Yeah,
they have the right to refuse service. It's like I
sure.
want a show based on a black hole in the universe, how it sucks in all the light. No, I don't want to do
That's not.
that. Or they might go, man, that's brilliant. We could do that. I could see the visual things happening a mile away. So they think that's exciting, but that's part of their process because those guys spend their time in what I call the cave. They get in the cave and they write music, and they don't want to sit there and write something they don't want to write. So they're not trying to be obstinate or rude. It's just like, no, that idea does not interest me. And they'll say it in a more politically correct way, but that's what it is. They
What
want to
if
write something
we?
that excites them. Yeah, they want something that excites them.
Yeah,
And so,
I can see that too, but I'm just in a logistical sense, in a practical sense. I just want to make sure that we're getting the thought in our head that the longer you wait, the less probability you're going to get what you want from who you want.
right.
So, um, it's more of an encouragement. Go ahead, figure out what it's going to cost, reach out, and let's get that done now.
Yeah. And in terms of like music and with drill and show design, some things to think about when you're looking at or listening to shows, because they'll have their whole library on the web, and you can go through and you can click through and you can even most of them you can ask for copies of scores, and they'll send you a score and you can kind of study it. But some things to think about, flute, woodwind, choirs, and soloists are generally more highly rewarded with points at a contest than brass groups. Guard is always added reward. So if you don't have a guard and you have the means of producing a guard, I've know like Lindsay Gold, she just said, well, we're going to have a guard. So she just got like 5 or 6 kids at a 1A school, and those kids learned how to be a color guard. And so that's always a reward. Ensembles, they should be rewarded more than soloists, but ensembles are generally easier to make sound good.
Okay.
So it's a situation where you've got to figure out if that do you have the kids that can make good sounds as an ensemble? The old Mike Lunney quote, if you don't have a soloist, don't have a soloist.
Exactly.
It's better just to have the whole section play instead of having some kid just kind of barely get through the solo and does an okay job, but it's not extraordinary. There has to be a certain amount of swag to what they're doing. So don't just pick out a piece and say, "Oh, I've got a good flute player. I bet she can do this." And again, brass can get rewarded for features, but generally not as much as woodwinds. So I always tried to have at least twice as many woodwind features as brass features. It
Can you tell
just
me why?
garnered more points.
Can you
What's
tell me
that?
why we think that way? Why do they think that way? Why are they rewarded?
When I judge, I just realize that I think it's harder for woodwinds to uh, to produce because you've got to deal with electronics now, and
Right.
woodwinds are just naturally more musical. I hate to say that. That's a pretty broad brush, isn't it? But musicians, in terms of woodwind players, are generally a lot more musical than brass players. Brass players were the Cro-Magnon cavemen and cavewomen of the music world, and we play higher, louder, faster, higher, louder, faster. Woodwinds are shall we play with vibrato or shall we have a fast vibrato or a slow vibrato? So I think it's not because it's a bias towards woodwinds. Woodwinds just play better. Brass soloists tend to crack more in solos in marching season. They just do. And woodwinds don't. They don't. So I think they're more rewarded with that. And speaking of brass, if you've got the kids and the talent level in your group for a brass feature, man, if you can get some double tonguing in there, something fast and furious and give them some recovery time afterwards. Oh my gosh, judges love that. And it
Yeah.
doesn't even have to pertain it just has to be in the context of the integrity of the show. It can't just be something like, boom, here we are. We're going to double tongue really fast,
So
so make it
my
exciting.
brain, as you do this stuff, I start going real time experience. I did see this year a lot of saxophone uh, features,
Hmm.
like a group, Barry, tenor,
Yeah.
altos.
The
I
quartet.
did
Yeah.
see, I saw a bassoon quartet
Oh,
on
yeah.
the on the field mic'd.
Yeah.
So, validity to what you're saying, it's not something I would have ever thought I would see, but awesome. Good for them. Okay, cool.
Yeah. And
That's
something
something,
else to
and
kind of
that's
think about that things that you never see. I never did this, but I know bands who do it. Have a talent show before you start your show design.
okay.
Have a talent show. Just ask your kids, I just want to know anybody who can do anything. Can you play harmonica?
What
Can
does
you
that
play
mean?
accordion?
Whoa, whoa.
Can you juggle? Can you play banjo? Can you play bagpipes? Can you play didgeridoo? Can you
That's
know so
great.
and so you can give that to a show designer and you can say, "Hey man, I want to do like a scenes of Sonoran desert and I want it to be really cool and I've got this amazing harmonica player." And they'll go, "Oh my gosh, that's going to be beautiful." So we can have a setup on the front and use this amazing harmonica player to set the atmosphere for this western.
You've picked out two instruments that I've never associated: amazing harmonica,
Yeah.
amazing accordion,
Yeah, yeah.
amazing banjo.
Yeah.
All the
Do
instruments they pass out at the gates to hell.
That's right. That's right. But if played correctly, they're amazing.
Yeah,
I think it was the Troopers this last year used a harmonica player in their
that's awesome.
production. And it was just, and one year they used a cellist, for their Black Gold show, and
Right.
she was up on top of that big tower and played cello, played electric cello.
That's
Um,
cool. That's cool.
and so they find that those people don't just show up. They actively search that what are some things that you guys can do that we don't know about. And I've seen schools use people from the school population that aren't even in band. They just have a
Right.
lot of friends in band, and they might play beautiful classical guitar.
Right.
So, well, yeah, this
So
kid went to nationals in classical guitar. Let's use him in the show, man. Let's do Malagueña.
again, I saw electric guitar amplified on the field this year. I saw classical guitar, and it wasn't for very much of the program. It was just a
No,
spot that made it go, ah, that's cool. I saw a lot of vocalists
yes,
singing on the field this year. So amplify.
yeah.
But so good call, man. A talent show. And when should we
Yeah,
have
just
that
to
talent
find
show?
out. Right now, I would have
Yeah.
it before Christmas break. And just say, hey, we're going to have a talent show, and the band's welcome to come and watch, and you can sign up for whatever you. It could even be visually. It could be some sort of dancing. It could be, it could be a ballerina. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It could be something gorgeous. You do a Tchaikovsky show and have a beautiful ballerina do a routine that you had no earthly idea this kid who played oboe was a world class ballerina. So it really does pay huge dividends because when it comes down to it, we want all this to fit in the arc of the show and the integrity of what our show design is. But think about this: you've announced a lot of shows. Okay, at the end of the day, aren't there certain bands that are memorable and other bands aren't?
Yep. Exactly.
So if you have a world class ballerina or a world class harmonica player, then at the end
Mm.
of the day, the judges are at area are thinking, man, that was just really amazing. They did that Western piece and that haunting harmonica solo is just so beautiful in the band, because it can be a
Yeah.
beautiful musical instrument. It's not just, bluegrass music or whatever, so
In the
we
right
want to make our
hands.
show, yeah, in the right hands. But we want to make it memorable so that judge or judges at the end of the day, they figure, now that one band. I think one real good point of that was Sundown, a little 2A
Okay.
school here in the state of
Okay.
Texas that had a vocalist. And I think that's the first time I've ever heard a vocalist with a Sundown band. Absolutely gorgeous, doing
It's
all the
cool.
pretty horses. And it was just
Yeah.
beautiful, the euphonium duet with it. And that made that band memorable. I mean, they were a
Yeah.
powerhouse. They were a powerhouse of a band, but that made it musically very memorable. At the end of the day, when I was doing tabulation or when I was judging them at Region 16, the end of the day it was like, oh my gosh, that Sundown band is just they're doing some really cool stuff this year. They've always been good. In fact, that little band has more appearances at the state marching contest than any band in the state of Texas. And they have the
Yeah.
most gold medals than any band in the state of Texas from the Roughnecks from the oil patch. Their mascot's the
Right.
Roughnecks, and
And to
the pride of
tell
the oil
people that
patch.
don't have context on that, we're talking about a very, 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 very small geographic town,
Yeah,
but we got a band of 100 and plus.
yeah.
So when we say a little band, we're more referencing
The classification.
the
Yeah,
the classification they come from. They're a big band, but you're
yeah. They
right.
marched like
And
130 kids.
it yeah, it's very memorable. I agree with you
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. So that show sticks out of my mind where there's other bands that played and marched really well, but their show wasn't memorable. It
Yeah.
was just like, yeah, that was good, and
Right.
Sundown was, they know when to turn it on.
We've had this conversation too, and I think in the context of having your show designed for you, there are golf clap bands. Nice.
Hmm.
Nice. You did everything you needed to do on the rubric. Perfect. Good
Yeah.
one. But then there's bands you're like, oh, yes.
Yeah.
And I think that's where maybe show design can help you.
Yes. That's exactly right. Because a good show designer, or even as just me as a band director, we try to figure out that about every 20, 30 seconds, something important has to happen. We graph it out. It might be a
Yeah.
drill move. It might be a high energy impact by the brass. It might be a beautiful woodwind quintet. It might be a guard thing that happens, but something has to happen, and those arcs get bigger. Does it make sense until the
It
climax
does.
of the
Yeah. Yeah.
show, and then it brings back, and then you have the big ending. So there's got to be, in my opinion, 5 times in the show where you're just at full throttle. Boom. But there's also got to be all those other moments where it's real tender and easy and gentle. Not easy as far as easy to play, but just more gentle on the ears. We can't just
Right.
we can't make it loud the whole time like the good old 80s because that's like drinking out of a fire hydrant. You know what I mean? It's just too
I
much all at
do.
once. So, and
But at the
it
same time,
doesn't fit what we need to do.
I've seen this a lot of times too. There are bands that I'm just like totally engaged with, and I want more when it's finished. I still would. That was all, and I look and they've used up a lot of time. I didn't realize where did that 7 minutes go? As
Yeah.
opposed to a band that you're like, okay, 3 more minutes of this.
I
You know
hate
what I
that you
mean?
bring that up because as a judge, I've done that. I looked at the stadium clock. I'll be judging and looking over. Oh, we still got 3 minutes. And others, it's like, we're done.
It's one of those
And
great examples of how
yeah,
fast 8 minutes can be or how long
that's
eight
right.
minutes can
That's
be.
right. And so just make sure that you figure out what special talent you have. We've all got what, even to the point of what's our best section. You know, if you have two really amazing all-state bassoonists, then by all means, let's have some kind of little bassoon moment for 15 seconds just to show off those kids because you can't really
Sure.
march a bassoon. I guess you could, but it'd be kind of hard to do with that
Expensive
reed,
on
you
reeds.
know, expensive on reeds. Yeah. And something else to think about when you're putting a show together. A lot of bands I'll notice, especially older directors, they want the whole band playing the whole time. You know, it's like just constant the whole time. And that really kind of pulls away from what they're being judged on. I'm a real strong believer that the band, sections of the band, they don't have to play more than 30 or 45 seconds, but then you have to build in what I call recovery time.
Sure.
So if you're a brass player, you've got to have your 30, 45 seconds, you're doing something, then maybe they'll just be part of the visual package. Could be doing body movement while the woodwinds are being featured, or like one band I saw, they did a solo oboe microphoned electronically on Red Line Tango by John Mackey. It was incredible. It was
Yeah.
incredible. How many times you get to hear a really cool, precise, beautiful oboe solo on a fast tune? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So in the brass, meanwhile, they weren't playing. You know, they were moving. They were moving props. They were doing body movement. They were doing drill, doing hard drill, by the way. And so you utilize that to give them recovery time for every section of the band, whether it's percussion, front ensemble, whatever. You give them their moment in the spotlight, and then you back off away from them and allow someone else to have the spotlight turned on to
So let
them.
me ask you this because I'm ignorant. This is an ignorant question. What do we call the body movements now? Is that a like I saw
Some people
some
call it
groups.
choreography, some call it visuals, some call it body movement. I think in the primitive times of when I was in high school, it was called a visual because it was just a horn move, you know, kind of thing. And then it kind of turned into some body movement. And now it's like full blown choreography. Those kids have to have almost dance skills to
I
produce
care to
at the
say I
level they
saw
produce at.
groups this year that would have a quintet or a small group playing on the sideline, and the rest of them they're doing things that I'm not sure I could have done
Oh, yeah, me too.
physically.
Yeah,
So
physically they're doing amazing things. And with a good show designer, like you get the music is written and edited by one person, and they might do the percussion book, someone else might do the percussion book, and then you have someone who does your drill, and a lot of times they will have a person who provides video of all the body movement that you want done in your show. So I've
yeah.
sat with bands and watched them work where they'll sit in the performing arts center, the cafeteria, whatever's the biggest room, and they'll show it up on the screen. And the kids, you know, like how they do the TikTok videos. Remember the old days where they'd copy the dances? So they would just have that, and the person on the video would explain to them, okay, this will be at such and such in the show. This is what we're going to do. Here's the count sequence. And they'll do it for them. So now do that with me. Do that with me again. Okay, now practice this. So that's all on their Google Drive. So those kids practice it at home like TikTok videos until they
That's
learn
fun.
the body movement involved. So you don't spend a, you know, people look at it, the old school guys go, oh, such a waste of time doing all that body movement. We could rehearse on music. You still can. Just tell the kids to watch the video and copy it.
Right.
You know,
And then
or
say,
build it
all right,
into your
do
summer
it.
band routine. Yeah, just do it. You don't have to spend 3 hours working on body movement, but that is a big portion of what we do now. Because good, bad, or ugly, or whatever people's opinions are, now with judges, with at the state level, 4A, 5A, 6A in Texas, there is a content and design judge. Bum, 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 bum.
Right.
Content and design judge. So in the past, UIL's always been about whoever plays the cleanest wins. Would you agree with
Yeah.
that? Whoever
Yeah, I
plays the
do.
cleanest wins. And that's how UIL was built on that fact. That's how we developed our bands. Now they've gone across that hurdle, and I think it's a good one. Now bands are getting credit for the content and design of their show. So if it's a high level of intellectual content where they're having to do a lot of body movement while they play, okay, then it's like they get credit for that now, you know. And so the bands that just stand there and just don't do a high level of intellectual content, they won't be scored as highly because that seventh judge will have them 13th out of 14 bands.
Right.
Meanwhile, the woodwind judge might have them first in woodwinds, but
Yeah.
they're playing dotted half notes and quarter notes.
So,
So it's a weird thing, but you've got to design that into your show. There must be enough content to be successful and exciting for the kids, but not so much that they flounder.
and so I would bring that back into context by saying, if that sounds overwhelming, if that sounds daunting and not something you're sure you could do, there are people that can do it,
Yeah, yeah,
and they will do it for you if you contact them and say,
yeah.
"This is what I need."
And if
Yeah.
it's a money issue, which I totally respect, there's bands out there that don't have a lot of budget. Okay, you can get some kid that marched with Santa Clara Vanguard at a local university or a university 2 hours away, and send them your show and say, I need body movement on this. And you could probably in a decent band program get a substantial amount of good body movement from a kid who's just experienced it for 3 years. And they
Right.
can say, oh, yeah, we can do this, 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 this. And they'll do the video for you. And you might just pay them, two, $300, and they'll be excited because they're a college student. So you don't have to go to the guy who does body movement for the Blue Devils and
No,
pay
I get it.
wazoos of
The,
money, to get that
and
done.
I need you to correct me if I'm wrong on this too. Listen, I want to support the guys that do this. I want them to make a great living, and I want quality to continue to increase in our band programs. But I also know that when I was, I went to a smaller university in Texas, great school, but we had people, whether they were composition majors or they just liked doing it, that wrote our college level arrangements.
Right.
They were there, they were doing that. That's part of what they were learning how to do, and they enjoyed it. It's not like you can't find somebody to help you do this if you're willing to make the connections and just ask.
Right.
We had our friend, our friend Daniel Todd on talking about choosing music, where he said straight up, I was never embarrassed to call anybody and ask questions.
Yeah.
It's just part of what I do to make me better or make my band better. So in the context of drill design or show design, or there are people that if you if you don't have, how do I say this right? In the realistic terms of your budget and your program, I say shoot for the moon first, but don't be scared to go ask for help in
Yeah.
places you might not think of.
Yeah. Or budget wise, something as simple as having your ag department build props, asking them if they'll do it. I don't know how many times, like even at area marching, state marching, that we would go to another band and ask permission and say, can we take pictures of your props? And we would take close up pictures and measure and give all that back to the ag department, and they would build the frames for us.
Right.
So and there's companies out there that'll do it, but if that's not in your budgetary design in order to build props and so forth, there's probably people who can do it. There's probably band dads and some moms
Yeah.
out there that love working with metal and wood. You know what I mean? And they would bring them to an area contest and just let them stay in the parking lot and ask permission to look at props. And they can build them for you. We never had our props at Wiley built by um, big companies. It was always
And
a
listen,
crew of
we're
band
talking about
dads that did it.
scrim frames.
Yeah.
We're talking about maybe some steps to a platform.
Hmm.
I've seen a lot of people build angle up
Rampage.
to
Yeah.
a
Do some
flat. Yeah.
ramps.
It's not like we're talking about designing a skyscraper. We're just,
Right. And a lot of the band dads will go, man, it's a lot harder to build a smoker. So he goes, I can do that out of angle iron and paint it and put some
Yeah.
epoxy on it that'll be make it where it's not slick, and you know, so they're
Yeah.
really brilliant. You get the right people involved and they'll figure it out. And or you can, if it's within your means, it's nothing wrong with going to a company and saying, I need this, and this, and they'll provide it for you and ship it to you. You know, so don't let the money push you down, because there's always going to be that argument with show design, and it's like the quiet part out loud, where they say, well, there's those bands that win, they just have lots of money. And there's some truth to that, but I'll tell you this, Derek, there's a lot of bands with lots of money that don't win.
Right. And Peter said,
So it's not the
don't
money that's making them win.
don't tell me that until you try.
Yeah, yeah,
I don't automatically discount what we're discussing right now because you think it's all about money. I'm trying to
yeah,
tell you there's all kinds of people. Listen, let's find the silver lining in what you just said. Some of these guys have so many props that they just want to get rid of some.
yeah,
Go find them.
yeah. Oh, I've seen people selling with prearranged selling props in the state marching contest parking lot, where both bands will be there and they'll make prior arrangements that, hey man, we want your such and such props. Sure, it'll be this much money, and they both show up in the parking lot and they pull the props over when they're done with their shows and stuff, push it in the other trailer. They give them some money for the props. There's
Don't
clearing.
have
There's
to take it
Facebook
home.
pages. Yeah, there's Facebook pages of prop swaps and buying and purchasing and all that. And so there's things out there. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. Okay.
So I feel like you are probably exactly on task, but my brain is struggling to remember the premise here. Start now, start early, because you don't know what you have to buy until you figure out what you're going to do, right? Um,
Right.
and
But
you
it's the
probably
idea of
don't know
what do we
that,
need to do for show design?
right?
What are we
And
looking
it's
for?
and the, I think what we've kind of evolved into is we could all do it. That you just got to start early. You got to make sure you ask the right questions and give the right answers, and uh, just realize that this is not. It's. I think it's just too easy to say we can't do that.
Right.
You're selling your kids short, and you're selling your program short if you do that.
Right.
So
And when you're
now
looking
I'll
at
jump back.
music, yeah, when you're looking at music, don't be afraid of big elongated sections when it's real strong and powerful. It's like whole note after whole note. Because if you've given your kids enough recovery time in the midst of the show, they can finish strong. It's real easy to do. Just have the kids or write it in yourself before you give them the parts. A part breathing, B, C, and D, where they know where they're supposed to breathe, and they know exactly how to sneak out and how to sneak back in and ramp up quickly. And then everyone plays like A B band plays at the beginning of this, and then the C's breathe here and the D's breathe here. A's will breathe here. Now we all take a breath, and now we're going to play the last note. So it sounds complicated, but if you figure it out, because so many times at contest and show design, they shy away from that because when they get to contest, the band just kind of dies on the vine. It's like
Yeah,
they just don't have the oomph to get through the last of the show. That's a design issue as a
and
director. Okay.
and so I
You,
was
you
going to
got to
ask you, but
figure it out. Yeah.
because I don't know, but I have heard groups that started like, oh man, this is a great group, but somewhere around the 5 minute mark, I went, oh, where did they go?
Yeah.
Where
They
did they
fade
go?
out.
So you're using terminology. I want to make sure that everybody has has an opportunity to understand. When you're talking about recovery time, what do you specifically mean with that? That
That they're
you
not
have to
playing.
give your no, I got it, but you have to give your
Yeah.
trumpets a minute off in the middle, even if it's
Well,
not a
even
minute.
flutes. Even if it's not a minute, even if it's 20 seconds is a lifeline, to a woodwind section. They've just finished, you know, making their fingers bloody, playing this
Sure.
technical passage and being soloed on the front with a big, huge woodwind feature. And now you don't want them to immediately turn into a different huge technical thing that's going to be basically covered up by percussion, because now they're
Right.
not on the front sideline and there's, you know how it all works. I think the
I do.
directors out there know what I'm talking about. But give them time to all of a sudden they just put horns at trail, and all of a sudden they're just follow the leader, go backfield, do a bunch of body movement, maybe even move props. You know, we've used that in show design. There was a gold medalist in 1A that used these big black boxes. And these black boxes were on the field, and people would ask us, they would say, what's the purpose of the black boxes? And I'd say, it's to keep the brass players from playing. Their job during the show is to keep moving the black boxes. All the notes except for the wonderful first chair horn all state soloist had notes probably in the B flat scale, and they played in little pulses of 15, 20 seconds, and then they would move the black boxes and they would
Yeah.
stack them, and the woodwinds would get on top of the black, and the woodwinds were incredible. The
Yeah.
woodwinds would just they would just fly. But the brass were weak that year, except for the all-state soloist. First
Yeah.
chair French horn player. In the ATSSB band at a 1A school, and so they won the gold medal. And that was the purpose of those boxes. They created different tiers when they did their features, but it also, the brass had something to do. They moved the boxes, they set the boxes up on the end, they put them down. So
Right.
you can write it in a way to give them recovery time, and to hide sections that aren't your strongest section,
Okay.
if that makes sense.
From a recovery standpoint, is this what we used to do with percussion features?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's exactly what happened with the old school drum corps. That's how drum and bugle corps did it, and then it kind of bled over into our marching bands because it used to be we just played marches the whole time and marched military.
Sure.
So if you were a trumpet player, man, you just played. You maybe on the trio, the trumpets would lay out, but then all of a sudden drum corps started doing that to give their brass players recovery time, and then bands hooked onto it, and now there's never really a drum solo, but there's all kinds of other things we can do. You know,
Yeah. Okay. So that helped. I just want to make sure we all understand
yeah.
A, what recovery is, and B, why it's important. And you hit that
Yeah,
well.
and
Thanks.
just plant it in there where they know when to breathe, what parts of the band are supposed to play at this given moment. If you have a like 120 piece marching band and it's supposed to be piano, why do you have all 120 playing?
Yeah.
Divide your band into A, B, and C band. Only the A's play when it's piano. That's all your juniors and seniors. So you get this beautiful piano sound, and then the rest of them come back in as it ramps up, you know, and we want to teach the kids dynamics, but sometimes it's unreasonable. We need to play pianissimo here. So 120 kids, let's go. That's unreasonable. That's always going to sound weak, so we try to make it work. Most bands are playing, all the way up into sometimes in 5A, they're playing grade level shows about grade level 2 to 2.5, but they're just written creatively enough that they sound complex,
Yeah.
which is really cool. Key signature wise, we tried to stay within two flats or three flats concert pitch, so we're in B flat or E flat kind of moment, because that sounds the best in a marching band. If you have a stronger group, you can kind of vary outside of that. But it's kind of like, I think the biggest example, it's not a marching band example, but Hymn Song of Philip Bliss starts in the key of concert D flat. Okay. And so you can teach your kids to push down the right fingers, but there's a world of difference of pushing down the right fingers. And a concert D flat is a different tuned note in the key of E flat than it is in the key of D flat, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. You
It
know what I
does.
mean? So
I do.
it keeps it where things are not in the sweet spot. So if you've got a average band and above average or a below average band, you're best to keep it about a grade 2. A weaker band, not I shouldn't say weaker, a younger band, maybe a grade
Yeah.
1. Nothing wrong with that. Okay.
Right.
Um,
But and
Double
I'm
check
going to say this too. Certain instruments just lay well in certain keys.
yeah, and that's
I
why we
don't know
play in
what,
those keys.
and I don't know if that's physics. I don't know if that's an
Oh, it's
emotional thing
physics.
that happens, but putting them in a key that doesn't lay well, D flat concert,
Yeah.
is you're just asking for
And then
more.
asking
You're
them to
just
move.
creating work.
Now
Yeah.
we're going to march. Now we're going to march while you're fighting these intonation battles.
Right.
Okay. So just kind of keep that in mind. Double check the parts when you're looking at it, that if you have an average to a below average strength band, make sure that all the parts are written in that power suite range of a horn. So your trumpets are playing, I'll just throw up this. They're playing from an F first space to maybe a D or a fourth line, or at the most maybe an F at the top of the staff. It's all in the staff, not below the staff, not above the staff, because that's really, unless you have really dedicated trumpet players, that's really the power range of the instrument where we can make our
Right.
prettiest sounds. And that
Yeah.
applies, I could go down every instrument and tell you the range I'm looking for. And if you have, and that's why the writers want that information, because if you have really good trumpet players, they might put a little trumpet feature in there, and make that work. Okay.
Yeah. And I was going to say this too. This is probably not the right way to say it, but I would rather have somebody say, uh, that wasn't the most challenging show I've ever heard as they hand me my trophy than I would have them say, yeah, you almost made it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does that
And
make
we
sense
can,
what I'm saying?
it does. And with the right people around you helping, you can make a show that's not very challenging look
Sound. Yeah.
very challenging. Sometimes I hate to quiet part out loud again. Sometimes there's some smoke and mirrors. Let's make this work. So it doesn't have to be boring to be memorable. Or to be
Yeah.
clean. So you can
Or
make it.
it doesn't have to be 16th and 32nd notes to be exciting,
Right.
to be quality. Yeah.
Yeah, to be quality. Um, in terms of drill design, I always try to avoid, we talk about slides where the horn's pointed to the front, shoulders are pressed to the front sideline, we're moving across the field. Not a problem. But don't have any kind of big technical passage going on while you're trying to do that because those kids have their bodies twisted. And I try to avoid that as much as possible, but it's a real I mean, it's like almost like a plague. It's like every band
Yeah.
you see, they do it. We always cheated. It would look like a 90-degree slide, but if we started 16 counts off the front sideline, at the end of that 16 count move, they were not any longer 16 counts off the front sideline. They were 12 counts off the front sideline. So they
Yeah.
could turn their shoulders and press them to the front, but their lower torso didn't have to do a full 45 degrees. So
Right.
we would cheat it, and the judges never mentioned it. They never mentioned, said, hey, on that slide, y'all are moving forward on that. They never caught it. They just saw this band with perfect shoulders doing a slide, but we were drill wise with my drill designer, we were cheating. He was like, no, I don't ever want to have a 90-degree slide. So make sure at the end of the 16 count move, the whole block is 4 counts further front field so they don't have to turn their bodies as much. Okay.
Okay.
Same thing in drill with intervals. Keep the interval consistent as much as possible in the midst of the drill move. I've seen so many bands where it expands really big and that has to happen sometimes. But don't do it just arbitrarily. Those kids need to know that we're at a 3-step interval for this entire drill move. I like to say that the sets that you see on the drill page and the picture on the field, that's the picture. The movement between the pictures is the movie. And so if the
I've heard
movie
you
is
say
not
it.
consistent, then that's not going to work. So that's a drill design feature that sometimes drill writers don't really, they just write it because their computer does it really well. So you've got to really communicate with them that my kids can't do that. They can't march
Right.
backwards at a full size step size and increase their interval and cover into a separate file and play this technical passage. So I've got to
Exactly.
cut out 2 of these things, so that's back to communication.
Yep. Cool. Well, what else is on your magic list? This is great stuff, but
Oh,
you've
I don't know if it's a
exhausted my
magic
ability.
list. Yeah. On those big impact moments, I don't know how many times I've clinicked when you look at the score and they'll have the root of the chord, the third of the chord, and the fifth of the chord. So in theory, you go ba da da dum. On the big impact moments, take out the third if there's tuning problems.
Power
Just look at
chords.
the score and tell it. Yeah, just put it into power chords. The judges' minds will infer the third of the chord in their
Right.
mind. They'll
That's
never
a
mention it.
electric guitar term. If you're not familiar with it, you take the
Yes,
third
yeah.
out. It's
Yeah,
like,
that's about all I know about electric guitars, power chords. But yeah, if it's a big impact moment, because all of our not all, a majority of our tuning problems involve the third of the chord.
I would agree with that.
So the root and the fifth are generally, pure intonation. They have to be 2 cents apart from each other. You know what I mean? The fifth is 2 cents sharp. Man, the human ear can't really hear that very well, But with the if it's a minor chord or major chord, that third's flexing around pretty big, So if it's a big moment there, just take out any sevenths or ninths, or especially thirds, just make it a power chord, man. Just boom,
Yeah.
and it's amazing how much that fixes it, But all these things together, we just have to make sure that the integrity. I've got all these little tiny details, but everything put together with your color guard, what they do with your drill design, with your music, your front ensemble, if you have one, your battery, if you have one on the field, all that has to be connected in the show to where it's the same integrity across everything. So it can't be like your percussion play, you know, technically 10 times harder than anyone else in the band for the whole show, even if they're not playing loud. Integrity wise, it doesn't make sense, or
It
vice
doesn't
versa.
fit.
Your percussion are playing straight quarter notes and the brass are double tonguing features all over the place. That's not going to work either. It all has to
Right.
make sense to the human ear, you know.
Right.
And the easiest way to figure out if your show design has worked, and I've done this, this is really funny. We had bus drivers. Every school has bus drivers. So I had my bus drivers for my band because they loved driving for the band because the band kids treated them well. They called them Mr. Smith and Mr. Thompson. They treated them like adults and they treated them with respect. So I'd ask those guys after we got the show kind of on the field, I'd say, hey, after you finish your routes in the morning, can you come to the stadium and can you write down some comments? Do you understand this show? Does this make sense to you? And it was amazing because they would go, oh yeah, this makes perfect sense. So they'd go, I don't get it.
Yeah, what are you
And
trying
I'd
to
say, oh,
tell me?
we've got to
Yeah.
change something because if the bus drivers don't understand it, then on some level the judges won't understand it either. Having a degree doesn't make you understand the show better. So those guys they could help me out tremendously. Had never marched in a band before, but they could go, I don't understand this thing with the color guard over here. What is this about? And it's like, well, you've got a point, gentlemen. So that really
I would
doesn't
have
make sense.
never thought to do that.
Yeah,
That's
get the
probably a
bus drivers to
genius
come help
thinking.
you because they'll
That's
tell you.
awesome.
But there's, how bus drivers are. That don't make any sense, Mister Lunney. That's stupid.
Right.
So yeah, well,
It's,
yeah, you're right.
if you want the unvarnished version,
That's right. They'll tell you the Bill Woods version.
I'm trying to remember. You told me a story of a guy that you'd already made it through a couple of rounds and got up on the podium with you and said, "You guys got a one?"
Yeah, y'all made a one. We were fifth in state that year, and they were sincere, and they were probably not incorrect. And their standards of what
Yeah.
they
Yeah. Yeah.
wanted. Okay. But
Okay.
yeah, just some ideas. So you band directors out there, take it for what it's worth. Take what you want, throw away the rest. I'm pretty thick-skinned. But I just over the years I've noticed those are the things that I see and hear that are not really taken care of, and it needs to start happening. Not like 6 hours a day, but maybe spend like 30 minutes and start delving into this. Dive into it and figure it out.
Yeah. My only urgency, my caveat to that would be if you're planning on using somebody, you probably need to have that conversation pretty quick.
Yes, I say prior to December 1st.
Yeah.
You better have it lined up what you're going to be doing if you really want time to adjust. I mean, you could do it
It,
later. It's not going to kill you, but it gives you time to be flexible if you do it now.
right.
Because then you
And
can
it's
go,
one of
hey,
those
I
things,
don't like this clarinet part. Can you help me with this?
but that's stuff after you've made the commitment, after you've made the relationship, after you've established we're going to do this, then you have the luxury of several months of maybe if we did that, tweak here, tweak there.
Yes,
I'm not sure
that's
this really
exactly
fits.
right. Oh,
So
that's exactly right. Because we'll play the marching parts during concert band every once in a while, just to give the kids a little taste and a little
yeah,
difference of what they're doing. We might be doing Procession of the Nobles for contests, but hey, let's do this Gershwin thing. This is our marching arrangements, and of course the percussion go like crazy, man. They're like, oh, let's get out the equipment. And the guys, slow down, slow down. We don't need everything. Just get one set of tenors and a couple of snares. But they love it just to play through it, and then you can kind of go, I don't think that's going to work. And then you have that collaboration. Either they're going to convince me it's going to work, I'm going to convince them it's not going to work, but we're going to figure it out. But if you wait too
and it's
late, it's already baked in the cake, man. It's
yeah.
already done. You can't change it at that point.
So would you hold your same rule of we talked about picking our concert evaluation music. You pick your rating when you pick your music. Same concept for next year's field show.
Same concept, but you have a big luxury with marching band. You can change the music any way you want to.
Rough.
You can't do that at
Gosh.
UIL. You can't just say, "Oh, this march is pretty good except for the whole trio. Let's just not play the trio." But in marching
Nope.
band, you can go, "This isn't going to work right here. Let's take out those 25 seconds completely and let's replace it with 25 seconds at the end that does this." Does it make sense? So you have
Yeah,
free reign. It's like clay. You can
yeah, yeah.
sculpt with it. In
So
UIL,
let
you
me
don't
ask
have
you
that
this.
luxury.
Ask you this point too. If you get a good show designer, writer, music, they're typically not offended when you say, "I appreciate what you did, but we're going to have to figure something out here. This isn't working."
Yeah.
They're typically not offended if you say, uh, "This is not 100% working. How can you fix this?" Is that part of the agreement you have with these guys?
It is, but I would say this that from working with a lot of these ladies and gentlemen over the years, you have to be very respectful in how you approach them
Well, I get that.
because when they design a show, that's like their baby. You know what I mean? And they're handing you their infant baby that they designed this show for you. So you don't just hold the baby and go, "God, this thing's
I have
ugly."
6 hands.
So you've got to be respectful in that manner, and
No,
they'll be the
I
same
get
way to
that.
you.
I get
Yeah,
that.
but I'm just saying that I've seen designers and music writers fire the people they work for and
Yeah.
just say, "Okay, well, I'm done. Fine.
Right.
I've got plenty of business." Because
And
they
I
don't have
really,
to write a show for you. They don't have to write drill for you. Those guys, the good ones, are busy, man.
so I'll harken
And
back to
they're
two
not going to
things you
necessarily be
said.
that rude, but they will not write for you if they don't want to.
When they say, "Trust me," give
Hmm.
them the benefit of the doubt.
Yes.
They probably had a concept in mind. And the second part of that is, um, well, you've already said it. Nobody has to be ugly,
Right.
and you're
And
not
we
going to
have to
get your money back.
Yeah, and we've got to remember too that we're hiring these people to collaborate because that's in their wheelhouse. If I hire an oboe professor to come teach my oboe player, I'm not going to correct fingerings.
Right.
But we'll do that as
I
band
got it.
directors with show designers. We'll dive in and start wrenching through that engine. And I guess the biggest thing is make sure whatever you do different cuts, whatever in your show, talk to them about it. Don't just do it because we band directors we are asking for that guidance. How come we're resistant to that guidance? Give them video, give them
Right.
audio where they can listen to your band and go, "That's not what we wanted," because we're paying for that service. And then it infuriates those drill designers. I know it does because I've talked to them. It infuriates them when someone just says, "Yeah, just give me the show. All right, now go away."
Right.
Well, what's the point of that? You could go to
I got
Walmart
it.
and buy a tire, but we need someone who
Yeah.
knows how to put the tire on, make the tire match the other three tires.
Balance.
Yeah, balance. We're paying for that, so why do we do it the other way? So
Yeah.
my drill designer friends out there, hopefully you'll appreciate what I'm trying to do for you here by telling directors to utilize that service. You're paying for it, man.
Relationship,
Yeah.
communication.
Yes. Send them, even if it's the second week of summer band, send them recordings as ugly as it might be. They can listen to it and go, "Oh, that's not really what I meant." And they'll
But the
rewrite it
other
for
part of
you.
that too is they're in demand for a reason.
That's
It's
right.
not like
If you want a yes man or a yes woman, you'll find one really cheap.
hire me.
Yeah. Yeah, you can hire Mike Lunney. I've actually had a couple of people say, "Hey, Mike, can you kind of design the show for me?" And I'm like, "Oh my God, that's so far outside my wheelhouse. I give you these ideas. It's different giving ideas than it is executing drill design and show design." And it's like, I just go, "Man, I'm flattered that you would think that of me, but that's like asking me to help a kid on their violin concerto." So that's totally outside my wheelhouse. I trust those guys around me to
Mr.
educate me as a band director.
Mr. Lunney, I'll tell you, we talked about all the wow moments we have in the press box. There are times when I go, he wrote that himself.
Yes. Yeah.
He designed
When you
that
see
whole
the
thing.
baritones marching 4 to 8, 4 to 5, yes,
So
in a class 2A
all right.
band running across the field, you're going, "Oh my gosh." You know, no one would have
So
done
my
that if the,
my biggest takeaway today is don't be scared to ask. Uh,
Yes.
do it early.
Yes.
Be early is to be on time. See,
Yeah.
I snuck that in.
That's right.
And go into it open minded with the thought that you're both pulling the same direction.
Yes. And don't be afraid to ask for the things I mentioned. Say, like, what do you think about a such and such type feature? Ask your music writer that. They might go, no, that's not going to work with what you told me were your strengths and weaknesses, you know. So you just got to make sure it works, for
Okay,
everybody
cool.
involved.
Well, it's not a conversation I thought we'd be having, this early in the schedule of life, but
Yeah.
I'm glad we had it. That's good stuff.
Hey, to finish up, this will blow your mind. There's a lot of directors out there that operate 2 years in advance. They've already got their entire show designed for next year.
Well, my
Not very many of them, but I know them.
my
They've already
hat's
got
off
it
to
set
you.
out, drill design and everything, because they've got a big enough band. They know how many they're going to have, and it's all
That's what I
it's
was
all
going to
done.
say.
Yeah, it's all
Yeah,
done.
awesome. Well, if anybody has any questions, I'm sure ask Mike at intomusic.com. He'd be glad
Oh yeah.
to answer your questions if we didn't touch on it today. And we'll be back next week with more amazing insight from this gentleman who selflessly gives his time. We appreciate you, brother.
Well, I've just made all the mistakes for you, so that's don't
Just
make the
telling you what
mistakes I
didn't
made.
work.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Awesome. All right, brother. We have a great week.
You too. You too. It's been
All right.
fun.
See you soon.